everybody, it is Romania Black, and we're on episode 16 of Vinland Saga. I decided to keep my work shirt on today because I was like, maybe it'll usher in the billowy breeze of spring into this world of Vinland Saga. Nah, it's winter. It's winter, the cold dead of winter, and Ragnar is dead. R.I.P. Ragnar. I'm not stunned, but I'm surprised he's dead this quickly. I figured this season he was going to die because that's part of Askeladd's plan. But I did not expect it to happen this soon and being like, oh, and we haven't even got to see the aftermath. We've not getting to see like what Canute thinks of all this, if Thorfinn's going to be suspicious and be like, wow, Ragnar went off with these two guys of yours, and didn't come back, because Thorfinn's not dumb, he's just an edgelord, so I'm really excited. It's been over a week since I watched episode 15. I was out of town last weekend, so I'd recorded ahead, and now I'm just catching up to getting back to episode 16, so episode 15 is going to come out tomorrow on Patreon, episode 14 is going to come out on YouTube. I really don't have any big comments to talk about, which is good because there's no spoilers. But I do want to point out some comments by Ridasante and Edgar. Ridasante noted how and also not only Ridasante, there was another commenter, and I apologize for not getting your name, that commented that the language written on the treaty that Canute signed with Gratianus was maybe written in an international language that kind of is like mixed with Latin so that it could kind of be, across cultures understood by everybody. It's like the English of that time. So I thought that was interesting to note. So thank you. And that there was some Latin in it, and that Wales was referenced as Cambria in it as well. So I thought that was interesting. So I'm glad y'all pointed that out. That was great. And then Edgar talked about episode 14. It still floors me. Episode 14 is such an odd episode, and I still don't know what to do with it, but we've seen some of the repercussions of it in this last episode, so I'm like, okay, there's going to be build up to it. It's going to have significance. It's starting to already pay off. But Edgar noted how Anne and the ring that she stole could tie to how people deal with their understanding or the weighing of sin. And so I thought that was a really cool concept and I wrote my notes here, how Askeladd and his men, because it seems like Anne, she's like, Askeladd and his men killed an entire village. They slaughtered all these people and nothing bad happened to them. They got away with it. They weren't smited down by God. They got away with it. But that's funny because in the most roundabout way, her like kind of seeing that and being like, well, what's the point if we're not getting punished? It kind of has that trajectory like we talked in the last episode, because now her actions of telling Thorkell and them about them are impacting Askeladd and making things more tense for them and messing up their plans. So it is having impact. So it's almost like thinking of things as how maybe you, even though you can't see the punishment happening and you think that they're not being punished by God or whatever, maybe they are because of inadvertently you. And so I was like, that's really cool. So the idea that these men are getting away with these crimes, whereas she is seemingly being punished by losing her family over just stealing a ring versus them committing slaughter, then you're like, well, did Askeladd and his men really get away scot-free though? Because as we see in the last episode, it doesn't seem to be the case. And I don't know. I just get the idea that killing Ragnar, I know that Askeladd had great intentions. He's like, well, I'll get Canute all to myself. And now Ragnar just dealing the final blow to Askeladd, being like, oh, by the way, his dad wants him dead, so have fun with that. He's like, I actually cared for this kid and wanted to take care of him. You just want to use him, so have fun. And then he pieces out. But yeah, I'm going to miss Ragnar. I'm going to miss that kind soul amidst this brutal world and this brutal winter. Gonna miss that. But maybe Thorfinn can fill the Ragnar-shaped hole in Canute's heart. We'll see, right? And meanwhile, Bjorn is suspicious. Askeladd, my dude, I'm following you through this because I want to see what you're going to do with all this now. How is Canute going to react? What's going to happen? It's all open territory, and I'm pretty excited. So we're not going to waste any more time. We're going to dive right in. So we're going to watch episode 16 of Vinland Saga, and we are going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. really wondered if I should bring out Whiteboard Coon, but it is a lesson on the history of beasts, so it seems appropriate. That cliffhanger was ridiculous. What? Mm-mm. No way, man. Now I gotta watch it. Now I gotta watch episode 17. It's all downhill from here. I realize there's only 24 episodes in this season, so it's all downhill from here. It's episode 16 now, so you got 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. There's 8 episodes. We're entering the final act of this season, and of course the final act is probably going to deal with the battle with Thorkell and what they're going to do from here, what Canute is going to do. Canute's at his lowest point. Like, the Canute has lost. The thing of it is that it's not that Canute isn't used to death. Ragnar established a few episodes ago that Canute has been surrounded by death his whole life, but the one person who showed him unconditional kindness is now dead, and so clearly it's shaken him to his core, and so he's just trying to sit there and decide, what do I do about all this? And so there's lots of things going on underneath the surface, which is why Whiteboard Coon is here, but man, what a good episode. I want to say first and foremost that the gore of this, gore doesn't bother me, but like some like creepy stuff, like just nails getting ripped off, I can't. I'm like, bleh, nope. Like when I realized they were chopping fingers off, I'm like, okay, that's really gross, but like ripping nails off, I'm like, no. I've had that happen once before. It's disgusting. I don't ever want to have anything like that happen again. So nope. So there's that. But yeah, the owl taking off the ear, the fact the body's decomposed enough that old David Bowie from Labyrinth could come in and take the ear off. Oof. And I feel like, you could make the comment about the owl representing wisdom and taking the ear. You should have listened or should have not done whatever. But there's like heads all over the place. This series doesn't shy away from the brutality. It's like, nope. There's blood and guts everywhere. Hope you're ready. And then I wondered when we cut back to the place that it's Canute seeing Ragnar. And just being in a state of shock. Our glossy-lipped prince eating the rabbit stew and them seeing Ragnar with his sword. And Thorfinn doesn't look surprised, but he's just kind of like, interesting. I figured Thorfinn would say more, but he did not this episode. He was just kind of edgy. Again, a lot of people are like, well, Thorfinn's kind of like, he's hard to get on board of as a protagonist. I'm like, well, he's not really the protagonist. It's Askeladd. Askeladd's our protagonist. At this point, I'm convinced that Askeladd is the protagonist of this story. And Thorfinn is maybe a secondary protagonist, and maybe he will become the main protagonist. But I'm convinced it's Askeladd. Right now, this is Askeladd's story. We're just following along with him. And Bjorn as well. So, but yeah, we're going to put our people up here. Of old Canute here, that he is mourning Ragnar. Because yeah, and the thing about it is that Canute doesn't even really have to say that how important Ragnar was. It's pretty obvious. And he's like, he was stabbed from behind with a spear, and tragically, please accept my sincere condolences, Your Highness. Yeah, and Thorfinn's just kind of like, when you actually get a close-up on Thorfinn, he looks kind of surprised by it as well, which is so sad. But yeah, poor Canute. Because now he's all alone. I mean, the only person he has with them is someone he doesn't like, which is Askeladd, and then Thorfinn, who's Thorfinn. With that giant-ass sword. Ragnar's sword is freaking huge. It's enormous. He says we were eating rabbit stew and he left suddenly. And then he's like, that's weird. Just now. But, oh yeah, he's just in shock. And I like the close-up on Thorfinn in this moment. I like the close-up on Thorfinn because for all his edginess, Thorfinn... I think Thorfinn does empathize with Canute. I do think that for as much as he does not want to do what Askeladd wants to tell him to do, which makes sense because it's Askeladd, he does empathize with Canute Because he understands where Canute's coming from. He lost his father in the midst of battle. He knows what that feels like. It haunts him to this day. It's like the source of his angst and that he's still dealing with. And so watching Canute deal with losing Ragnar, it's like he's probably like looking into a mirror. He's like, I know what this feels like. So I like that he's quiet. And Askeladd's like, we need to get out of here. I really thought when they talked about like burying the body and having a funeral, they were just going to cremate Ragnar and like cause a fire and erupt the whole. But no, they just left him in that damn house to, fossilize there. And so when he said, I don't want to, because Askeladd's like, don't leave the prince alone. And when Thorfinn says, what, you're kidding me, I don't want to. I thought for a second he was like, well, I don't want to leave him alone. And I was like, oh, look, you're empathizing. But no, he didn't want to be left alone with him and the corpse. And Canute just does not have any say in what's going on. Guarding the prince is your job. So, yeah, he has no control over himself. And I think that at least with Ragnar there was some way that Canute could bounce off something. And Canute had like a platform. Like Ragnar would give him, even though Ragnar did spoil him. Ragnar spoiled him a lot. But Ragnar did give him a place to like have a platform if you wanted it. It's just whether Canute chose to use it or not. And Canute often cowered away. But now that platform's gone. Like Ragnar spoke on his behalf. That's gone. Askeladd is just telling. It's like Canute watching Thorfinn being ordered to protect him. He's like, I should be the one ordering Thorfinn to protect me, not you ordering him to protect me. Like, I feel like Canute just sees that he has no agency in what he's doing. And going back to this OP, you can definitely tell the whole gambling aspects of it. Because they have the dice with Askeladd. He's paralyzed with fear. So this is an interesting conversation. We will bring up Askeladd and Bjorn. So I'm going to put old Askeladd here. He is our title protagonist, right? He is our main protagonist in all of this. So we have Askeladd in red. And I'm going to do Bjorn in this really pretty purple. Because purple is Bjorn's color. I'm thoroughly convinced. I like Bjorn. Bjorn has grown on me this entire series. And I really like his character. Especially in the last few episodes. Because Bjorn is not mindless. He's not a hunk. He's followed Askeladd enough that he's kind of picked up on the kind of dealings of Askeladd and the thinkings that Askeladd does. So he's kind of thinking of things too. And he's like, is that weakling of a prince going to be okay? And he thinks that his plan backfired. So, the history of beasts. I love that this title is called that. So Bjorn is wondering, did Askeladd do the right thing? What I like about their dynamic is that Bjorn is not, to our knowledge, contemplating betraying Askeladd like all of the other Danes are. He's not. He's being very honest and having an open conversation with Askeladd saying, maybe we should have kept him alive a little bit longer. Are you being a little hasty? Maybe, which does beg the question of why Askeladd was so eager to kill him, but I feel like maybe Askeladd sees the writing on the wall and he's like, yeah, Thorkell's going to catch up with us really soon, or the army's going to catch up with us, and there's an opening. He's like, I need to get rid of as many loose ends right now as I can so I can get myself and the prince closer back to Gainsborough. I feel like as they get closer to Gainsborough, Askeladd's realizing, I need to tie up all my loose ends, get all these people out of the way, and then make it to where I am ready to leave with the army, and go by myself with the prince back into town. Which is sad because that implies he's going to betray Bjorn. But Bjorn doesn't know that yet. So it's all fascinating. But yeah. But him basically saying, what did they say here? Most men don't know what really happened. Now he tells Bjorn to be quiet. Askeladd's like, which is a curious thing. Askeladd says to keep Ragnar's death secret. When those guys were committing mutiny at the end of the episode and they were sitting in the snow beside him and they said Ragnar was right, I thought they were going to reveal that it was Askeladd's idea to kill him. I really thought that was going to come out in the open and be a thing, and it wasn't. Askeladd had a look on his face like, are you about to make it a thing? But it didn't. But this part kind of interests me because he says most of the men don't know what really happened. I'm like, but these guys, are you just banking that they're not going to be gossips? that they're not going to like spread the word, because they clearly spread the word throughout this episode. So it's interesting he chooses to tell Bjorn not to be quiet about it. He's like, the English are the ones who did it. Don't let the secret out. And he's like, I wonder, everyone knows you didn't get along with him. Bjorn's like, who are you fooling? He's like, everyone knows you didn't like him. They're going to be suspicious. He may be weak, but he's going to realize what happened. So Bjorn does give Canute the benefit of the doubt. He says that Canute is weak, but not dumb. He's like, yeah, no, Canute's going to figure out what happened. He's not stupid. And Askeladd says that we just need to make sure that there's no proof. No proof, no body, no death. No proof, it's fine. Definitely the more cunning root of things. I love their banter back and forth. The reason the prince is so weak is because Ragnar spoiled him. Yes, absolutely. I had to make Ragnar disappear. Otherwise, he'd cause me grief. And so this is where it gets interesting. Bjorn's like, well, the fact that he's weak is a good thing, right? He questions, he's like, should Canute not be weak? He's like, isn't it a good thing that Canute is weak? That means we can control him. It makes him easy to control. He could be used as a perfect stepping stone to achieve greatness. Which is funny, because that's kind of where Askeladd's coming from, in a sense, or so we thought, right? He's like, you could use the prince for personal gain. The funny thing is that up until now, I was like, well, yeah, that's what Askeladd's doing. He's using Canute to get to the place he's using the prince to get a place secured for him on the court so that he can make sure that Wales is not attacked by the English anymore. It just seemed like whatever Bjorn was suggesting is what Askeladd had planned. But then Askeladd kind of stops, and I love that he looks back at him. He's like, Bjorn, why have you served me all this time? And Bjorn's like, because I secretly like you. No, he says, well, no, it's because I wanted to. He's like, because I wanted to follow you. Yeah, so Bjorn acknowledges that he follows Askeladd because he wants to. Because he doesn't say because he believes in him, but that there is an underlying that Bjorn, he finds Askeladd to be a powerful, reliable presence, and he does believe in him, but he's like, no, it's because I want to. And Askeladd says, I'm the same. I choose my own lord too. My lord must be the type of man that makes me want to serve him. So Askeladd is like, I don't follow cowards. He follows strength. Follows strength. I'm going to put strength in quotation marks because it does not necessarily mean physically strong, but strong like in spirit, strong in will, strong in resolve. I feel like that's what made Thor's the type of person that Askeladd wanted to follow, because he's like, oh, you could lead my men. You're someone I'd want to follow. Like, I feel like it's that same tie-in to Thor's himself, right? And he, I feel, sees potential for Canute to be the same. But it's one of those things like a flower can't grow if you smother it. And Ragnar was smothering the bloom. So he's like, we just wipe that away. And now the flower can bloom. And so I think that's what he intends. Right? It's fascinating. And Bjorn's like, oh, like, I love how astonished Bjorn looks throughout this episode. He's just like, oh, really, Askeladd? Oh, okay. He's like, and then he says, I'm just kidding. God, he's so hard to read. He's like, I'm making a gamble, Bjorn. You're so full of shit, Askeladd. He says he's just kidding. Making a gamble. But I think that's the BS. I think the gamble is just, no, he really wants to shape Canute into someone that he could follow. that it could lead a people and not be controlled. Because as we learn in this episode, Askeladd is quite privy to the history of this area in this place and time. And he's like, I don't want a puppet to follow, because anybody can influence a puppet. He's like, if I'm not in the right place at the right time, someone else will influence him. That's not going to work for me and my agenda. He's like, no, I want to follow somebody that can think for themselves and be strong and do their own thing, but that I can kind of align my own interests with. But he tells Bjorn it's all a gamble. If we get lucky, the prince might completely change. So his whole thing is that he wants the prince to change and grow stronger. And he's like, I need to be the influence on this prince, not Ragnar. And Bjorn's like, well, what are you going to do if you don't get lucky? He's like, he might get depressed and never recover. He's like, you're making a gamble, Askeladd, and this is a pretty big gamble. He's like, what if it doesn't pan out? And he says, then I'll abandon him. Because that's what Askeladd's done this whole series. He has made gambles and bets, and then if they don't work out, he just leaves. And it's so funny because he is making the same type of gamble on Canute that he did with Thorfinn, right? That he did with Thorfinn. So that is interesting because he is wondering if Canute will have the same potential that Thor's will have. I think that kind of points to the idea that he thought maybe Thorfinn would have the same type of potential. But then when he saw how like full of rage and spite Thorfinn was, and he's like, oh, you're just like all the Danes. Well, that didn't pan out, so I guess I'll just wipe that away. And he's tried to abandon him this whole time. He's been like, oh, Thorfinn, if you don't come back, I guess we'll just leave him. Bye. Like, he's not tried to coddle Thorfinn, and now it makes more sense because he's like, oh, you didn't live up to that expectation I had. So, never mind. I guess I'll just abandon you. But Thorfinn, being persistent, won't let himself be abandoned and keeps coming back for more. And Askeladd, who's not going to bother himself with it, for Askeladd, it's a win-win situation. He's like, oh, well, I don't really care about you anymore because I've seen you don't have the range. You don't have the range, Thorfinn. He's like, so you're not going to work. But I feel like Askeladd realizes that, well, I can't expect Thorfinn to become like his father like I'd hoped. So I don't care. I'll just abandon him. But if he chooses to stick around, I guess I'll use him because he's pretty useful. What else can I do? So that makes a lot more sense. I like that. I like that makes a lot more sense. If that happens, I'll abandon him and try something else. But I like the Bjorn. He wouldn't deserve to be my lord. I like Bjorn just like, the fudge? I just love Bjorn in this episode. It's like, what do you want me to do, Askeladd? So he says that Canute has to deserve Askeladd's loyalty. That's how you get it. You got to deserve it. Otherwise, he's going to leave you high and dry. And Bjorn's like, I mean, I think that's a compliment to Bjorn in a way because Askeladd's kept Bjorn around and values his insight. So maybe that's a compliment to Bjorn. Like just, hey, you're doing pretty good if I'm still here talking to you. But yeah, so then we have the thing with this guy that is getting beat up for information. I figured they were going to torture him because he was like, oh, kill me. And I'm like, oh, you're going to get tortured. He thinks he's a martyr. That's why I hate Christians. I was like, man, the shade. But it's interesting here because we'll talk about the history of beasts, right? The history of beasts. And they're like, you didn't kick him hard enough. And so I want to kind of, I'm going to put Thorfinn up here. I'm going to put Thorfinn up here. Thorfinn's over here empathizing. Thorfinn's up here empathizing with Canute. They're kind of chilling out and doing their own thing. And I wanted to kind of bring up the history of beasts, the thing that this title is talked about. Because there are some differences throughout this. One that gets talked about is how the Danes, it's pretty much brutality. Like, it's brutality and just sheer strength, right? Because their whole thing is, well, you just didn't kick him hard enough. If you keep kicking him harder, eventually he's going to talk because he's going to, he needs to, he'll feel too much pain. And they're like, well, and Askeladd's like, no, you idiots, you're just going to kill him. Whereas Askeladd, who I fully believe is Welsh, talks about how he's like, if you keep kicking him in the jaw and the thing, he can't talk. So his whole thing is literally like torture, cunning, and strategy. So this rest of this season is really, you have Askeladd over here, and I'm gonna put the whole Welsh thing in parentheses. You have him. It's basically, this whole season is going to come down to, okay, Askeladd is basing everything on his cunning, his strategy, and his ability to read the situation. And it's going to be like, is strategy going to overwhelm strength? Is brains going to overwhelm brawn in this? Not to say Askeladd isn't strong. He is. But it's really going to come down to which side is going to be the more successful. The problem with Askeladd, he's literally by himself. He has Bjorn, Thorfinn only because Thorfinn wants to kill him, and Canute doesn't even really care for him at this point. So Askeladd's kind of alone. But, so yeah. So he gets down there and he's like, he tells the Englishman, and he can speak English, he's like, don't overdo it. He's like, if you kill him, we can't get him to talk. And he just looks so, he's so pretentious there. He's like, if you kill him, we can't make him talk. Like, he looks so old there. And this guy's like, well, go ahead and kill me. I'm not telling you anything. And then he says the Lord sees everything. And again, Askeladd is not a religious man. You can tell where he's just like, oh. Like, Askeladd's just not having any of the talk. He's like, he's seen all the evil things you Danes have done. He's like, oh, he still has some fight in him. I like that that's his response. He's like, oh, he still has some strength in him. Let's just, and he asks him to go get any shears. Ugh. So this conversation about the history of beasts, I really, really like. He's like, I'll say it again, English captain. And he wants to know 3 things. So he wants to know how many reinforcements they have. A lot. How long till they get there? Not long. And then how did they find out that they're here? That's the one thing we don't get answers for. We get answers about the reinforcements. They're here. But Askeladd, as far as we know, has not found out that Anne, the girl from the village, gave their position away, which I find interesting. He's like, how'd they find out that we're here? And the guy's like, he says he'll let him live if he tells them. And he's like, you're beasts. I thought he was going to spit on him. I really thought he was going to spit. Like, when he turned and, like, faced Askeladd, I thought he was going to spit at him. But he calls them bastards. You'll be punished. A death befitting of you bastards awaits you. And I like that Askeladd's just like, you know what? I'm gonna lay down some history for you. I'm gonna lay down some lore, if you will. I just love that kind of like looked on his face, because at this point, I'm pretty sure Askeladd does not like the Danes. He also does not like the English either, because they're a threat to his, family and his people as well. So I like when he's like, will these shears... I like he says nothing. He just waits till they get the shears. And he's like, yep, those will do. And the look in his eye where he's like, oh, Captain, your nails, they're too long. I can't. I'm like, let's just go another thing. He's like, I cut too deep. And he makes him hold him down. And he's like, there are 3 things I want to know, and I'll skip the rest. Oh. And I love that the Danes are like, oh. They're like, what are you doing? I love that Bjorn's like, that's so nasty. That the Danes, they don't get the torture. Which would make sense, because then they're like, well, it's not fair. He can't fight back. Like, it's not strength. It's just gross. You're just being, you're not even giving him a fighting chance, right? It's not even a battle. He's like, what's he holding out for? Yeah, and the one guy's like, well, why don't you just kill him? Like, why are you stalling? Like, that just is so against their nature, right? He says, go to hell, you Danes, you bastards. If you hadn't come, then and he's like, you burned down my village, and you tortured my wife and daughter and killed them. And he's like, you beasts, this is our land. Leave. Oh, and I love Askeladd's face where he's like, no, it's not your land. like he's gonna play that card. Askeladd's like, oh, really? I see. We're the beasts. He's like, no, we're the same. You don't understand. You guys are ignorant. And I love that he's like, let's teach some history. The history of beasts, right? So I like this. We have our history of beasts. He's like, the history of beasts is that they're all the same. It's tale as old as time, song as old as rhyme. But there is a difference here. He's like, you should thank me for sharing this, you Saxon. Or is it the Anglos who live in this area? Oh, the shade. I love it. They're the same thing. This land did not belong to you originally. I like that he says the first inhabitants were the Celts. And I love that everything is framed so like beautifully. It's like a pristine wilderness with the greens and the floral and the fauna, and the man, like the light shining down on him as he like raises his arrow to the sky to hit a bird, and everything's so peaceful and serene. They lived in the forest and worshipped the spirits because they're pagan. They were the ancestors of the people who live in Wales now. And he frames that, again, because it's Askeladd, and Askeladd is part Welsh. He frames it so beautifully. He's like, and that, again, shows that there is some bias on Askeladd's part. And I think that's why Askeladd is somewhat comfortable in what he does, because he knows that maybe not. And maybe Askeladd is biased and doesn't believe that anyone came before the Celts. Maybe he thought the Celts were there first originally after all. I don't know, but in any case, he regards them as the true owners of this land. But then he says that the Romans came. That the Romans came and ruled. However, the way that he describes it sounds like what he was telling Bjorn. He says one day the Romans came. They were the rulers, and they lived alongside the Celts. They ruled but lived alongside. They didn't subjugate them or put them into slavery. They lived with the Celts and gave them their knowledge, their technology, and culture. And gave their knowledge, their tech, and their culture. So Askeladd frames that as if it's a good thing. He's like, yeah, they came and took over our lands, but they didn't rule over us. They didn't put us into slavery. They lived alongside of us and made us part of their people. And they shared their culture, technology, and knowledge with us and made us better. And that seems like what he sees in Canute. He's like, I want Canute to be a ruler that will make England like Rome, where they don't just go to wars and put people in slavery. Instead, they try to maybe foster this kind of collaboration. Maybe that's what he's wanting for Wales again. And he sees that Canute might be a vessel to do that. It would tie to why Askeladd is taking such an interest in Canute, because he sees those kind of ideals they saw in Thor's that could help to make a situation like this happen again, like something more civilized in Askeladd's mind. And we cut from this beautiful, pristine, like farmlands and everything. And he says the Romans left. But then the Romans left, leaving the Welsh. And then you Anglos and Saxons arrived. So yeah, it just you. And then came the Anglos and Saxons. And he says from there, he's like, it happened 500 years ago, but you didn't give anything to the Celts. So yeah, I love the way he says that. It was 500 years ago, and you have gave nothing. It's like, all you've done is take from my people. You didn't do like the Romans where you shared. You didn't bring anything good. You just came in, took over, and didn't give us anything in return. Yeah, and just the contempt on his face. He said, instead, you drove out the Celts from these fertile lands into the wastelands. So he's like, instead, you colonized it. You drove them to the wastelands. Yeah, so fun times. He's like, here's this history lesson from Askeladd. And he's like, you're lying. He's like, I'm not lying. if the Danes are beasts, then you Anglo-Saxons are beasts too. Which is kind of the point. They're all the same. Everybody is, during this battle, everybody is fighting for some reason, but everybody's in the same boat. There's no person more righteous than the other. Askeladd's just saying that ideally, we would want to be like this situation, where we can have a civilized ruling, where people share culture and knowledge, and there's benefits to both sides of it, versus one side just fights the other endlessly and it just ends in death and destruction, slavery and despair. He's like, yeah, you guys are beasts too. You stole these lands using violence. We Danes are going to steal these lands from you using even greater violence. So yeah, he's like, if you, again, we talk about that, if live by the sword, die by the sword, your violence just begets violence. He's like, and that's the problem. I think that's why he wants to believe in Canute, because he thinks Canute isn't like the other Danes. He could change things around. And then we get that damn owl pecking out a damn eyeball. I'm like, I didn't ask for this. You have no objections to that, right? Yeah. And he still calls them savages. And then Askeladd's like, oh, dang, your nose. Teachers hate kids that don't listen. I was like, I felt that. Askeladd. Let it be known, I don't have a pair of shears in my classroom, nor would I use them. I just sit there like clicking shears like the whole time, being like, teachers hate kids who don't listen, which most of my students are too old to be called kids. But yeah, so Askeladd's just like, I can see this is getting us nowhere. I can see this is not helping matters. And that's when he bends down. He's like, I love how animated and what an actor Askeladd is too, because he's like, oh, your nose, it's too long. Like he just acts like a jester. He's such a tricky cat. Now that I've got a good look at your face, your nose is too long. And that's when the ear notices that Thorkell is near. Askeladd gets some great expressions in this episode, for the record. He's got some great looks. I like it. So the English are attacking at night. They're attacking at night, but no, it's Thorkell. And then this guy, in true anime villain fashion, he's like, it was I, Dio. No, it was Thorkell all along. It's like, okay, all right. He's like, I can't wait to see you Danes eat each other alive. And he's like, oh, eat each other alive. And he's like, oh, it's Thorkell and his men. And that gets these people all riled up, because that's what they wanted to avoid. And I love Askeladd's expressions in this, where he's like, well, damn it. He's like, this is not good. Thorkell's coming and I need to get out of here. Because all the men are starting to freak out. Yeah, they're all starting to panic. And so they're all calling each other, Thorkell's coming. And then there he is. He's like at the base of the hill. I love that Thorkell, this man who 5 minutes from now is going to be massacring people and chopping them literally in half, is sitting there at the top of the hill going, like, just like looking like Ben Stiller from Zoolander, being like, I got the black lung pop. Like he just, God, it's such a contrast. He's so ridiculous. And so yeah, that's what it looks like. We're going to surround them. So we have Valley and Ingolf, and we have Oder. And take the right, and I'm going to take the middle. And here's the thing. He tells them to kill everyone you see. So Thorkell does not care about Askeladd. He didn't even know who Askeladd was until this episode. So that was a fun time figuring that out. But Thorkell is only interested in 2 people. He is our matchmaker, and he is only concerned about rescuing the power couple that is Thorfinn and Canute. He wants the prince's bargaining chip, and he wants Thorfinn as his playmate, which I feel like the I need an adult meme just would go there. The kid with a knife. I like that all he says is a kid with a knife. Like, you'll know him when you see him. He's literally the only child on the battlefield. Don't kill him either. Oh. And so, let it be known, Bjorn, what a badass, carrying Canute with one arm over his... Canute's probably like 160 pounds. Maybe 150, maybe, but he's got all the coats and stuff on. He's like just chucking 160 pounds, one-armed. Bjorn, our dude. And he's like, you can't leave Ragnar behind. I'm not going without Ragnar. Oh. Hearing Canute yell and like be so expressive it's different. I didn't think we'd hear Canute like lashing out like this, but he wanted Ragnar to come with him. And it sucks. And he's like, forget about it, Your Highness. We only have 3 sleds. We don't have room for a corpse. And he's like, well, then let's hold a funeral for him. Pay your respects to the death of a warrior. And he's like, we don't have time for that either. I figured they'd just light the entire place on fire and cremate him, and that would be the funeral just to appease Canute. To say, fine, we'll just light it on fire. It's okay. Does that make you happy or something? But he's like, you bastard. And Bjorn's like, just yoink. He just yeets him into the sled, like, I'm tired. And he's like, I'm not going. And Thorfinn keeps his distance a little bit. And then, God, that slap, man. I want to go back and watch that again. But yeah, no, just took his pimp hand and smacked old Canute. God, that was a smack, yeah. God. And just smacked him. And Thorfinn's like, Bjorn's like, okay, getting serious now. And just, that is the ultimate Askeladd's give me strength look. Every character in so many animes that I'm watching right now have the give me strength look. And that is his. With his slapping hand. Ragnar's dead and he won't come even if you call him. I love that shot I love an Askeladd's eye seeing Canute. That's such a good shot. He's like, you bastard. So at that point, I'm like, I wonder if Canute realized that Askeladd had him killed, if that's why he said it, or if he was just like, you have no... It's either one of a few things. It's either Canute realized in that moment that Askeladd did kill him, and he's like, are you kidding me? Or he's calling him a bastard because you're not letting me pay respects to the one man that I loved and cared about me, and you're a bastard because you're not letting me do this. Or realizing that he may not think that Askeladd killed Ragnar, but he realizes that Askeladd's going to take advantage of him. So it's one of those 3, right? I am glad that Thorfinn is quiet during most of this. Like, he's very reflective. He's very contemplative, and he lets Canute mourn, which is good for Thorfinn. I give props to Thorfinn for not being a total edgelord and letting Canute grieve. I do feel for him there. But yeah, so then we have the deserters. They were planning to join Thorkell, and they were hiding in the straw. I thought at this point that they were going to speak up. I thought that those guys hiding were going to reveal that it was all Askeladd that had done it. Maybe if Canute knows that it was Askeladd, it doesn't matter anymore. But I really thought they were going to spill. I thought they were going to say whatever. And they honestly think Askeladd's going to punish them. He's like, Ragnar was right. Luck's not on your side. We're not the only ones. Everyone knows we're in trouble. So Askeladd, from this conversation, from the deserters, he knows that a mutiny could be coming. I mean, the deserters make it pretty clear. They're like, yeah, this does not bode well for you. And he's like, we're in big trouble this time. And he says that Thorkell has you by the tail. And they brace themselves to get killed by Askeladd, and he doesn't. Askeladd's like, fine, stay. It's like, go ahead. I don't got time for you. Follow whichever leader you want. He's like, that's fine. If you're going to leave, then leave. I won't blame you. Askeladd knows that Thorkell is not going to leave them alive. He's like, no, those guys are as good as dead. He's like, and I don't want them following me. So he's like, sure, stay behind. Do whatever you want. If you come with me, then we're going to march. And that's all Askeladd can do. And I like that Bjorn instantly is like, let's go. Like, Bjorn is... He chooses to stay with Askeladd. Even when he knows they're getting betrayed, he chooses to stay. Which, I'm going to be really sad if Askeladd if Askeladd's plan involves him going through with taking Canute and running, I'm going to be kind of sad because that means he'll probably leave Bjorn behind and abandon him. And if Bjorn's followed him this whole time out of loyalty, and that's Askeladd's way of... But Askeladd hates the Danes, so does he hate the Danes enough to abandon Bjorn? I think he does. The sad thing is it seems kind of one-sided. I think Askeladd does not care about Bjorn. He's willing to be like, bye, and I've got Canute, I got my own agenda with the people of Wales to take care of. See ya. And he clearly doesn't care about Thorfinn. Thorfinn is just... Thorfinn is like, he's like, do I attack the rose bush or do I just like let it kind of grow next to my house? Like, it's one of those things. He's like, do I go cut it down or do I just let it grow there and hope it doesn't become a problem? I feel like that's his attitude towards Thorfinn. He just doesn't really see Thorfinn as an inconvenience and he doesn't have time to take care of him right now. So just let him, as long as he's not bothering anything, he's helping me protect Canute, just let him be. But Bjorn's helped him out a lot. And I feel at the end of the day, Askeladd, I feel it's one-sided. Bjorn has an intense loyalty to Askeladd, but Askeladd does not have an intense loyalty to Bjorn. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. We're going to march till we lose Thorkell. And Thorfinn just kind of follows along behind them. If you can't keep up, then you're dead. Which is true. Very true. Highly true. And then we have the morning sun where they're marching like into the shadow of the snow and everything. And there's damn Thorkell. God, I love that shot. That shot of him like coming up in the shadows, it's so freaking good. Like the lighting and everything's wonderful. Aren't the halfway point. And then it's just like a massacre. It's just heads, like a head gets chopped in half like at the jaw. It's just, he didn't even try. He was just like, screw it. I don't like you guys. And they were like, we're not like Askeladd. And he's like, I don't know who that is. I love that he didn't know this entire time. He just mows them down. Like he's chopping up a bush. And he's like, so your leader's name is Askeladd. The confirmation that Thorkell had no clue. He was like, who's this? Like the fact that him and Askeladd are not connected is great. I like it. He just wants the boy with the sword, with the knife, that has the warrior spirit. I thought for a second that maybe like they were going to take Ragnar's sword, but I wonder if any of them end up taking Ragnar's sword, because that sword of Ragnar's was pretty impressive. It was huge. I'm like, I wonder if they end up taking Ragnar's sword and then Canute recognizes it, or maybe Canute took the sword with him. Maybe. I don't know. And so he's like, well, and Thorkell's not dumb either. Thorkell... He's not dumb. He's realized that the men are worried. He's sensing the desperation. He's like, oh, well, if they already have deserters, that means that his forces are even more dwindling, which means that there probably is a lot of uncertainty, which means we can take advantage of that. We can just get there, mow them over, and get what we need and not have to have a big fight. Now, Askeladd thinks they should have let him join us. But Thorkell's like, no, they're worthless. I don't need cowards who surrender without putting up a fight. So Thorkell, again, is kind of similar to Askeladd in that it's funny, he's kind of like a little bit of the opposite, whereas Askeladd does not serve a coward. Thorkell does not let cowards serve him. So it's kind of like a little bit of a reversal on that. But I like it because in both scenarios, Thorkell and Askeladd, they're like, we don't need to have anybody weak-willed around us. It won't bode well. And Thorkell is very smart in that because he's like, they have the numbers. They don't need any more. These guys betrayed Askeladd. Who's to say they wouldn't try to betray Thorkell and his men? So he's like, well, screw that. These guys are two-faced. I'm not going to deal with that. And him saying... Men to the east, we're going to chase down the prince. To give it everything you've got. Oh my gosh. Yup. I thought when we got to the bridge that they would have made a cross. I thought when we got to this bridge that we were showing like a cross, like Canute had made a memorial for Ragnar. But again, there is no time. There's no time for that. And I love the Bjorn because he's the smarter one of the Danes. He's like, move it to your right. No, your other right. It's like, Move it back. They're like trying to get the wagon over the bridge. He's like, my right. They're trying to get the sled across the upper Severn River in the earldom of Mercia, January of 1014 AD. And it just shows all the people marching. Yep. And so he's like, Torgrim and Atli, come with me. So we got names for these guys finally. The guys in the OP that were just so bros, like having a great time, plotting mutinies. It's like, damn. I honestly did not. I suspected that they weren't happy with Askeladd because they voiced their concerns, but I didn't honestly think they would betray Askeladd. I didn't think that they would like host this mutiny. But Torgrim and Atli. So I'm gonna put them over here. We have Torgrim and Atli. Well, they've staged this mutiny and are probably going to die. So it was nice knowing y'all. Nice knowing you guys. As soon as you start doing this sort of thing, it's not good news. But he sends them to destroy the bridge. He sends all the guys to destroy the bridge, which is curious. It's interesting because he has them go destroy the bridge while the ear says he can't hear because there's too much noise. Now, you could argue on the one hand that he was destroying the bridge because it would make a distraction and it didn't matter if the ear could hear at that point. But then they make the comment that, well, this water's so shallow, they could just walk across it. But I think part of the reason he has them destroy the bridge is as a distraction. So while he can plan out what to do with Canute and Thorfinn and them, he's like, you guys go destroy the bridge. I'll figure out my escape plan while you're doing that. And the priest that we've not seen, Willibald, that we've not seen this whole time, he's just want more booze. He's just been drunk and wants more booze. And he starts looking through the cart for it. I'm curious to see what they do with Willibald. His character kind of has been on hiatus the last several episodes. We've not seen... I thought that Willibald would be trying to, like, offer a prayer to the prince. Like, say, like, some meaningful words about Ragnar. Which is funny if Ragnarok, the end of their days, come from Ragnar's death, right? I thought he'd offer, like, some words of encouragement, some praise, some psalms, something, some prayers. Not praise, but prayers. But no, he's just trying to get drunk. So that's interesting. Like, nobody is comforting the prince. The priest is looking for booze, and everybody is just exhausted. They're tired. Everybody's on, like, the bottom of the barrel on empty. And he's like, can't you tell we're in a tight spot, priest? And then the priest looks over to Canute. And Canute just looks so dark. Like, that expression, that poor Canute, that expression on his face is just like despair. Like, what do I do? I feel so bad for him. Like, what do I do without Ragnar? And again, we don't hear or see what Thorfinn thinks in all of this, which I like. I like that Thorfinn gives him some space again. So yeah, these guys, I wondered too if Askeladd sent them down there into the waters to like make their legs like freeze up, to like give them hypothermia or something, to make them like freeze to where they can't move as quickly. Because if they're getting in the cold water and they're out in the snow, like their feet and stuff, the circulation's gonna stop. So I wondered if him making them go down the water to destroy the bridge was also a way to slow them down if need be. So I don't know. But yeah, him looking down at them. And Askeladd, we finally get the reveal that he's known all this time that they're planning a mutiny. I love this, where he's like, Bjorn, Thorfinn. And plus, his voices, his talking to Thorfinn and Bjorn is masked by the sound of them chopping the axes because the ear can't hear. That makes sense. So the ear, he didn't want the ear to hear their plan of them getting away. Oh, okay. So he was tricking the ear. He knows the ear can hear exceptionally well. So when he asked the ear, he's like, can you hear them coming? He's like, it's too noisy. He's like, okay, I'll make even more noise by having them chop this bridge down. And while they're doing that, and the ear can't hear us, I'm going to tell Bjorn and Thorfinn what we're about to do. That makes more sense. Yeah. So he calls them over there, and he's like, what's wrong? And he says, come over here. And they're like, what is it? He's like, I want you to move the prince over to this carriage here, and you be the driver. And Bjorn, I like that there's a little animation where his thing goes, and he's like, Thorfinn, you ride with the prince and be on standby. And he's like, what? I love that him and Bjorn are like, what? Why? And then Bjorn realizes, he's like, hey, Askeladd, are you serious? It's my special talent that he can tell people what a man is like just by looking at his face. And he can see, like, all of the expressions they have, that they're all planning this mutiny and to betray him. I can tell there's some traitors among the loyal. Yep. And so they have this plan to take the prince away. They're going to take the prince they're going to take the prince to Thorkell, and hopefully Thorkell is going to accept their gift and leave him be. I'm like, but Thorkell's going to kill you, so that's dumb. He's like, more than half the men are already on our side. And it's just like dissent spreading through the ranks. Like, they're like, hey man, let's join the cause. Like, Hail Hydra and all that. And so it's funny because I'm like, Thorkell's going to kill you all, but you guys just turn on Askeladd. And so then Atli's like, well, you're going to betray him? Like, Atli's asking, like, we're going to betray Askeladd? He's led us through all this stuff. He's like, should we betray him? And he's like, oh, don't call it a betrayal, Atli. It's like, it's not that. He's a good leader. He's done a good job. So I like how he phrases this. He still says that Askeladd is a good leader and did a good job, but it's just his time has come. He's like, he's done all he can. It's just, that's why we're going to make him take responsibility as a leader. He's like, he's done a good job leading, and now he needs to own up to his duties. It's basically saying, like, it's a dog-eat-dog world, and as long as you're on top, we're good, but otherwise, we got to kick you to the curb and get something new. And he's like, we'll be fine. We'll be able to escape. Atli trying to tell him this. He's like, we've always been able to escape. He's like, up until now. But what about recently? And everything starts to, he's like, he's made one wrong call, one after the other. And I don't know if that's the case, because I think Askeladd's goal in his end game is to get Canute to Gainsborough without the rest of them. He does not want the Danes. He doesn't care if he kills the Danes because he hates them. He wants to get Prince Canute to Gainsborough so he can have a place in the court. It'll be a lot easier for him to get a place in the court if the Danes aren't with him to tell the king and Floki and whatever what went on while they were out in the mountains. He's like, nah, get rid of all this baggage. Just me and old Canute. We'll go to Gainsborough, and if Thorfinn tags along, he don't care. He's not going to babble on us because he doesn't have any stakes in this whatsoever. And Bjorn's loyal to me, so maybe I can bring him along too, but everybody else, Askeladd does not care about. And so I'm sure that Askeladd's like, I can leave you guys all behind, and you guys can deal with Thorkell. Not me. He's a good leader. Then why did he mess with Thorkell? So, and then that question comes up of why. So, why did he mess with Thorkell? And that's an odd question, because part of me is like, in the moment, it's complicated. He wanted the prince, so he really didn't have a choice. But then another part of me is like, maybe that was part of his plan too, to get Thorkell involved. It's curious. He's like, I'm not happy about it either, but we can't help it. He made a bet and he lost. That's all. So yeah, the way they phrase it, it kind of, again, reminds me a little bit of episode 14, because they're saying these characters are assuming that this one character has met its end and this is the end result, when we know as the audience that no, there's other factors that this side A, it's like side A thinks that 1 + 1 = 2, and so, but we, side B, can see, that's not exactly the best example, but we can see that there's another problem within that. there's like an X involved. So I'm not a mathematician at all, so that's a terrible example. But the point is, they're seeing it from one perspective, being like, oh, Askeladd made a bet and he lost. And I'm like, well, yeah, from your perspective, that may seem like that. But from Askeladd's perspective, he's got a whole nother agenda you don't even know about. So that's kind of what I mean by that. But... And then the rabbit, and then they hear the bridge collapsing. They're going to have a hard time getting their sleds and cargo across. So Askeladd tries to justify it, being like, look, they can't get their sleds and cargo across now. We're fine. It's all going to be okay. They can't survive long without food, so let's resume the march. And then the ear says that they're there, and then everything goes downhill. I love the effect of the spear tips glimmering in the sunlight on the snow. That's such a cool effect, and it looks so good in this. I'm like, yep, that's great. And Thorkell, who is a mountain of a man, is just trudging along like it's no big deal. And he fires this spear! This spear that he aims because he has like superhuman strength. Like with just 3 fingers, launches it and just spears like 4 guys at once. And Askeladd's like, oh shit. Whoops. They're like, oh, got 3. No, it got 4. Yep. Oh my god. There were 4 of them. This is bad. Mm-hmm. And he's like, whoa, calm down, man. Forget the spear. Like the Askeladd's like, we did just see a man fire a spear from 100 yards so hard that he speared 4 men with it. But forget about the spear just now. And they're like, no, the bridge being out means nothing. And so they all, I like that the one guy's like, it's almost like the Thorgrim is like Cartman off of South Park, where he's like, how do I reach Askeladd? He's like, don't you understand? He's like, you don't get it. We're having a mutiny. We're tired of marching. All you say is to march. And Askeladd's like, we just got to keep going. It'll pay off, all the stuff we've done. And meanwhile, he's already got Thorfinn and Bjorn and all of them on the sled, and the priest has joined them as well. So they are ready to go at any moment. They're ready to get out of there. He just has to give the signal. And then they all decide. And I love that they all, like, it's really good because you see he's like, they're going to get trouble. If they leave their cargo and chase us, they won't be able to replenish supplies. And you can just see everyone's faces, like the eyes staring through the armor. The guys all look glum and doom and gloom. Mm-hmm. Like none of them look happy. Like they all look so upset and just like over it. And even like Thorgrim, and he's like, if you understand, then start marching. He's like, well, there's no guarantee we'll be able to survive one more day. And I'm like, well, it's been like that from the start. Right? And Askeladd's like, yeah, you're about to betray me, aren't you? Mm-hmm. He's like, well, then this is where we say goodbye. I'm in a hurry. Excuse me. I'm like, Askeladd! And it's like everyone's surrounding them. I'm like, why? Why are we doing this now? And he's like, I'm like, how are you getting out of this? How is the horse? And Thorfinn's like, excuse me? And Bjorn's just like, oh God, Bjorn looks so good there. Bjorn's had some great shots these last episodes, but he looks so good there at the end, like the light shining. And then what does he see? He sees something. But what is it? Like they look, and Askeladd's looking too. What do they see? And we see Thorkell. So I'm like, they're not looking towards Thorkell, are they? What else is there? I'm like, did Askeladd, did he get like the Welsh people to show up to help them escape? Why did Bjorn look so shocked when he like looked up? Because they're facing away from the mountain. Like when the cart is facing away from the hilltop that Thorkell's on. So what did Bjorn get surprised by? What did they see? And Askeladd's looking towards away from Thorkell. So what? Dang it. Dang it. Now I gotta watch episode 17. I'll probably wait till after episode 15 and 14 come out. See what all y'all say about those episodes. But yeah, I can't wait a week. I'm going to have to watch episode 17 pretty quick. Because I gotta know what happens next. So, this was a great episode. Again, Askeladd, all the things. My dude. How are you getting out of this? What did Bjorn see? What's going on? How is Canute going to deal with this? Thorfinn, my dude, what are you going to do as the bodyguard? Willibald, what's he going to do? Thorkell, his men are coming down. It's going to be a bloodbath. I'm here for it, but what are we getting into? So, I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. Please, no spoilers, but I hope you all enjoyed this reaction discussion. But yeah, so we'll see what happens in old episode 17 next week. But in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with more Vinland Saga. Bye.